majority of your population. Hundreds and hundreds of millions of people are actually right in this zone right here, making less than this amount per month. So, on one hand, while you hear these tremendous figures about the growth of the Chinese economy, the relative size of their GDP, the Chinese consumer still remains at this level. Well, this is changing very rapidly, but I think it's very important to understand that distinction when looking at the Chinese market. The average GDP in the country in 2009 is just under 3,000 euros, and again, growing quite rapidly. Okay, another little quiz for you guys. Big prize offered to whoever gets this right. Not, sorry. Who here could tell me which one of these is correct, actually? A, B, C, or D? This is in terms of the relative, the size of the actual auto consumption. C? Yes? Any other guesses? This is total number of vehicles consumed in the country.
D.
Okay, B, D, good. Any other guesses? Okay, the answer is C. Whoever said that got it just right. Oh, he's raising his hand. He's claiming his victory. Very good. In fact, that's exactly right. So in 2010, the total consumption of passenger vehicles was 50 million units in China, which is substantially above the U.S. automobile consumption, which is amazing. So China actually passed the United States as the largest consumer automobile market in the world in 2009. And as we can see, the growth in the Chinese automobile possession has been growing very, very rapidly. 2008 rather was a huge year with 48% growth in ownership. But it seems to be normalizing now with 2010 growth of automobile ownership being at 20%. So this is a very interesting view. So if you look at this particular industry, you think about the entire ecosystem of the auto industry, and all of the other industries, electronics, steel, et cetera, that will actually be supplying the auto industry. In 2009, auto penetration in China was only 9.8 for every 100 households. And you compare that to the United States, which is 75% for 75 households for every 100 as an automobile. So if you think about the amount of growth that is left to go in this particular industry, and all of the ecosystems that are involved in supplying this industry, pretty mind-boggling. There's tremendous opportunity for growth. Okay, some other hot items. As many as 100 million Chinese consumers are expected to travel outside of China in the coming years, which will have a major impact on the global tourism industry. The Chinese tend to be the biggest shoppers. Actually, 1/3 of all of their travel expenditures, or tourism expenditures, tend to be on shopping in countries where they go. So, very interesting opportunity for countries around the world. Luxury. They are now the second largest, the third largest consumer of luxury goods after Japan and in the United States, and expected to consume in 2015 29% of the world's total luxury goods. Again, pretty astounding numbers. At the moment, they're only consuming 12% of the world's global luxury goods. Okay, very briefly, there are 7 key industries which we're going to see in the next 10 years are going to have tremendous growth and opportunities. And I know from what our partners, Anis has told us, that many of you are in a broad range of industries. Hopefully these will be of interest to you. The government has gotten behind and announced formally they're going to basically sponsor and push the development of 7 key industries in China. And historically, we see when the Chinese government gets behind certain industries, we see very, very, very substantial growth in those. New energy is one of the huge ones, with expected investment of over 300 billion euros in the coming years. Energy saving and environmental protection has been decreed as one of the very, very important industries and a major focus for the Chinese government. Electric vehicles is another major, major area of opportunity. The Chinese want to basically dominate and be the #1 producer of electric vehicles in the world. They want to be the most advanced technologically in this area as well. And expect in 2011, their target is very aggressive, expecting to have 5% of all vehicles sold in the country to be electric vehicles, which is far more aggressive than any other country in the world. So quite interesting. So for those of you who are anyway remotely involved in the ecosystem in these industries, potentially very interesting opportunities. Raw materials, nanotechnology, nanomaterials, and so on and so forth, another very, very important area. Advanced medicine and pharmacology, another very, very important area. There's a huge push from the Chinese government. They, in 2009, built approximately 200,000 rural health clinics for the population. So a very, very big push in this area from the Chinese government. Biobreeding, this is very heavily geared towards genetically modified animals and agriculture products, and this is of course aimed to deal with the huge growth in demand for food products in China, something that is of great concern to the government. And finally, the information industry, IT, telecommunications, software, all the usual suspects is another major push. So these are the 7 pillar industries that were announced in 2009 to be major, major growth areas by the Chinese government. So expect to see more here, we believe. Okay, how are we doing on time, Anis? So I have how many minutes? 5 or 10. All right, good, good, okay. Benefits of sourcing in China. So China is obviously a very low-cost place to source. It is, however, fraught with risks. There are probably 80% is one number that I've read very often, of all producers in China are expected to be completely subpar and inadequate for Western buyers. And this refers to industrial products, consumer goods, et cetera, et cetera. So it's extremely important to do due diligence and to very, very carefully screen whatever partners you do deal with. The price is very important. It's going to be very competitive on pricing. Huge availability of skilled labor, so ability to actually scale up manufacturing operations very rapidly. And China can actually handle a huge percentage of your sourcing needs, given their very, very broad industrial base across many, many different sectors, from electronics to textiles, et cetera, et cetera. So, the risks. There are many, many risks involved. So I thought this picture kind of captured it all. I thought I'd share it with you. So you might, for example, imagine your goods are being safely shipped across the country in something like this, but in fact, your precious cargo may be very, very well being shipped in something like this. So this is really the reality in China, is that it's very, very, very important to do extensive due diligence to understand who you're buying from. The reality is, again, 10 or 20% of these suppliers really only good enough to be considered for you as consumers in Europe, be it B2B or B2C type products. Doing research on the internet is nowhere near good enough. Very important to get hands-on, to do very, very detailed due diligence on the ground, to meet with and understand these partners, to work with a partner who can do that for you. And certifications and client references are often very, very dubious, so I would proceed with extreme caution for those. Having said that, there are tremendous opportunities to source high-quality, low-cost products, though it requires substantial due diligence and substantial care before, of course, proceeding with any partners on this basis. So, very finally, to succeed in China, I believe it is vital, amongst other things, to study the market very, very carefully, to understand the market incredibly well, understand opportunities, competitors, customers, channels, and so on and so forth, to be very, very vigilant and to be very, very flexible. In China, the rate of change is incredibly quick, and very often, things are really not as they appear to be. So if you go in with a business plan, expect to be changing that business plan 6 months, a year after you get in. If you think about a large franchise like Kentucky Fried Chicken or McDonald's, for example, they actually had not very much success in the first few years in China, despite all the research, all the work, all the preparation and experience they have going into new markets globally. But after many, many years of tweaking their formulas and their business plans, they then found great success. So that is something you will be expected to do, is to have great flexibility and adapt as you go along. Corruption, as this gentleman said, is an incredibly huge problem in China. It is absolutely pervasive. You're quite close to Russia, actually, and I think it's a very, very similar environment there. It is sort of, like the United States was, say, 150 years ago. It's still the wild, wild west. And, politicians are generally almost invariably corrupt. Permits for various types, the environmental permits, product certifications, quality certifications, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All of that stuff is essentially for sale. So yes, you can assume the worst. If you're competing against Chinese companies, assume that they are taking these shortcuts and therefore bypassing getting to market faster, less expensively, et cetera, et cetera. So absolutely very, very, very pervasive, definitely. And a major issue is a Western company going in there. You will not be able to, very likely, have access to the same channels and resources and abilities to do those things unless you work with local partners and so on and so forth. So that's actually a big reason that a lot of Western companies will actually partner with local companies to access their connections, their relationships, and their abilities to grease the wheels, so to speak. Thank you for that.
Is it a trend and they are breaking this relation now? For example, like Caterpillar and others?
Yeah, well, I'll say it's very interesting. If you look at Hu Jintao's latest speech he gave actually 6 months ago during one of their major planning sessions, he actually very, very clearly said that there is very, very pervasive corruption at all levels in the government in China. It's amazing for the country's presidents. And so he clearly acknowledges the problem and has stated that in the next 5 years it is one of the areas he wishes to see tackled very heavily. They've been saying this for a while, but never quite got, it made a lot of news, actually a lot of headlines, because no president has ever said it quite so explicitly and actually admitted to the problem being so pervasive in the country. So I believe that yes, there are a lot of initiatives to tackle it, but the problem is that the national governments, they really only have a certain level of control. So many decisions, permits, rights, certifications, et cetera, are actually given at the local level, and there are thousands upon thousands of local prefectures and politicians. It's very, very difficult to weed out corruption across all of those. But is it getting better? I would say yes, the trend is definitely positive, but I think it has a hell of a long way to go. I would say that Western companies still work with local partners very, very frequently to grease the wheels.
Isn't it a trend to break it now?
Every Western company has very, very, in fact, we're actually doing a case right now looking at these types of issues, specifically corruption and so on and so forth, and mapping certain things out. Every Western company, the Caterpillars of the world, et cetera, they have wonderful statements about how they will never do such things, et cetera, et cetera. The reality is to compete in the market, the vast majority of these very large multinationals are still working with partners who are doing these things. And the reality is they do these things in a way where they have sort of plausible deniability, where they can basically claim that they have no idea these things are being done. But the reality is, yes, I believe many of them, for the majority of these companies, are still using these types of tools. Yeah. The trend is, who knows, to continue likely at least until the game changes, until the market gets cleaned up.